Morgan Elise Johnson, co-founder and publisher of The TRiiBE. The TRiiBE is a digital publication and community in Chicago that has a mission to reshape the narrative of Black Chicago. I'm here with Chance the Rapper. Thank you so much for welcoming me into this space, your creative space.
Thank you, Morgan, for coming up here and being so kind.
Thank you. And what is this space? Tell us where we are.
We at the House of Kicks right now. This is my workspace, studio, editing house, and yeah, just all around, like, just a place where I get a lot of stuff done. I wish I had, like, I should have like a mission statement for the space, but it's basically the space that I've been using since 2020, where I film a lot of like my, concert stuff, where I do rehearsals, where I record my music, where we film our music videos, and yeah, it was kind of born out of more so my need to like expand my knowledge around film stuff than the music stuff, but it's for both, yeah.
So you shot Child of God here.
I shot Child of God here. I also shot The Heart and the Tongue here. I shot a couple of, I shot a lot of stuff that didn't come out. But yes, to answer your specific question, this is where we shot Child of God.
And is there like a creative routine that you have when you come into this space?
We've been trying to develop routines and develop discipline and processes. We had a couple of sessions up here where we just like, live jammed and like do some drums, do some, just making new ideas. And it's been very, very fruitful. It's been cool.
There's art and notes all over the space, and art has always been a point of connection between you and your fans. I'm thinking of the cover of the 10-Day album and how that became like a creative motif that you used and continued on for Acid Rap and Color and Book. So how has your aesthetic kind of evolved now with your latest project?
I think it's like just delving deeper into that connection between the visual arts and the music. So like that first cover, 10-Day, which I shot with Nolis, who's a photographer from Chicago when I first graduated high school. And then a few months later got the photo to painter and digital designer Brandon Bro, who's also, Chicago dude. And after he created that first piece, I kind of just, I immediately noticed that so many people were connecting with the music, but their entryway was that they were just fascinated by the cover art and just the style of it. And that wasn't super common, those paintings of like portrait style, and you see it kind of get repeated after. And yeah, that was Brandon's idea. And so later on, after he did the Acid Rap cover and did the Color and Book cover, in 2018, I did a few singles that like were connected, like as like the songs were like played off of each other sonically, but they were not like on one specific album. The real thing that connected them was that I had Brandon do individual cover arts of like one aesthetic for each piece. And he's a painter, he's a digital designer, but he's also an actual painter. When I found out that some of the pieces are like smaller or larger than each other, I was really like, interested in it. We talked about doing like a gallery so that people could come in and be like, oh, that shit is way bigger than I thought it was, or contextualizing the intentionality that he's putting into each piece and how it reflects what he thought of the music was like really interesting to me. And obviously we shelved that idea, like we ended up not doing it, but now we're coming back to it, and it's like in the process now of happening.
Did you grow up with a relationship to art in gallery spaces?
Not in gallery spaces, in my grandma's house and in my auntie's house, like you have all that like famous like faceless portraiture of like, or like figure art that's like just famous in people's houses. So Ernest Barnes, like he was a football player, this guy. I don't know if you guys could zoom in. But he created this retrospective that was really famous. It was called The Beauty of the Ghetto. And it was basically after he had spent this time in this Jewish community, he recognized like how good they were at documenting their culture's traditions. And this was at the beginning of like, you know, Black Power and Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, and this newfound like love for our identity as Black Americans, but we didn't really have a lot of documentation of what that culture looked like that was made by us. So this is the piece that everybody kind of knows him for. I don't know if you get a good. It's the joint. They're all in the club and they're like, but you know what I mean? Like, you got it. So it's like, but it's like our relationship with contemporary art, I feel like, is inherently different than white folks, because a lot of white folks that have the capital to be in art, they look at it as a form of currency or an investment. We just inherently, I feel like, have a connection with art and beauty and like wanting our house to look nice, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so it's like our appreciation of art is really just that. It's just like, what does this say about my house? How does it make my living room feel? And so being at my grandma's house, like or at my auntie Carolyn's house, like they had all this, like, you know, not just paintings, but like African sculpture stuff and like canes and like just stuff that like connected with them. You know, it wasn't a piece necessarily, to my knowledge, that they were looking to like grow in value and like make this capitalist thing. It's like, no, it's like really like, this just, it speaks to the house.
Music videos also have been so much a part of your creative expression, and they've evolved so much. I'm thinking about like Juice, where it's one solo performance in one location, and now you're doing music videos that are much more cinematic, and you're DPing music videos. So
Yeah.
how did you evolve to get to this point to want to take more control of the creative direction of your videos?
Thank you for noticing, first of all. Thank you for shouting out the fact that I did my first DP job. I was the director of photography for the Child of God video. I've always had like a say in what I wanted my videos to look like, but I don't think I always had the confidence to like push myself to just say like, hey, I'm directing this video, you know? A lot of times it'd be my idea, full stop, but it just like, you know, I'm rapping. So, but like you know, I kind of like took, you know, my visual aesthetic into my own hands in 2020 and, you know, bought a bunch of cameras and rigs and lenses and lights and you know, audio packages, and kind of just started like messing around with the camera. So you see a lot of like sketches and like promos that I made in 2020 that are like back on my IG, where there was, sometimes it's like, what's the point of this video? But really the point was I was just like practicing with the camera, trying to try a new move, trying to figure out you know, a lot of them are tests, to be honest. And I basically, you know, when I first started thinking about doing visuals, like music videos, I was like, well, how am I gonna do music videos if I don't have any music? And I was like, I'm gonna just make a song so I can make a music video, so that I could figure out what my aesthetic looks like. And I ended up writing a song called The Heart and the Tongue that was really a very, very meta and self-aware song about the difficulty of figuring out what to write about. But before I knew it, I was done with the song, and it was barred out, it was hard as hell. And I already had the visual imagery in my head of how I wanted to be positioned in the frame, how important the words would be as the subject in the film, and really like worked hand in hand with my guy, Troy Gano, who shoots a lot of my stuff, to make this one solid, singular thing, which is very similar to what I'm trying to do with the art pieces. I'm trying to like make very dense art that like somebody can come back and appreciate for different reasons at different times in their lives. And so The Heart and the Tongue was the first time that I like had did something like that, and it was so important to me that people saw the visuals that I only posted it on YouTube. Like, I didn't want anybody to listen to the song without the video. Like, I was very proud of that video. And Child of God was a situation where I had this very intentional idea about trying to figure out how to marry the art with the song. And it was kind of just staring in front of me the whole time, like just film her working on the piece, but just be intentional about the shots. And so that's how I ended up being the cinematographer on that video. I grew up watching like a lot of like martial arts films, and one of my favorite movies, one of the best movies of all time. Have you guys ever seen Jet Li, Hero? You know, man. That's why I'm good at cinematography, because when I was like 8 years old, I saw Hero, Jet Li. I don't want to say who the person is because I might be wrong. His name's Donald something, but he's an amazing cinematographer. And it's like every frame is actually a painting. And like when you can, learn to manipulate light and learn focal lengths and learn like even just what you want it to look like at a certain point, then you can storyboard it out and then just make that shit happen.
It's so interesting to hear you talk in such detail about the creative process because, when you came out, it feels like we were in this era where everybody was doing this point and shoot camera style with a bunch of guys in a video just pointing at the video and stuff with guns and like.
That's real.
But you really care about composition. And there's been a couple of times where I've just looked at your work and just been like, Chance cares. Like, where does that come from?
I think it comes from a love of the process, which is something that I think anybody in any line of work can grow tiresome of or frustrated in. Because success comes from like following through. It's not like a surprise. That's different from success. Success is like when you say I'm gonna do something and you do it. So I had to figure out what I wanted everything to look and feel like before I could even worry about what it sounded like. And so that's why the video stuff has been so like fun for me, because I actually do always love, looking at some pretty shots. Like it's cool to me.
It's probably a perk of being an independent artist too, because you don't have the pressure of I need to turn out this many songs quickly and it needs to do this many numbers. You're not like driving to get a bunch of singles out. Well, are you driving to get like a bunch of singles out there in a certain amount of time? Like, how do you really
I think I deal with that pressure sometimes, but then I instantly remember that it's like external, that it's not like a real thing that matters. Like, I think like what gives me joy is feeling heard or feeling understood. So I am still trying to work my record on radio. Now that I got Child of God out, I'm like, okay, this is beyond just a video thing. I like this. There's an important thing I'm trying to say, several important things I'm trying to say. I want as many people, period, like everybody in the world to hear it, because that's like part of the reason why I'm a musician and not like a nigga that just sings in the shower. Like I want people to hear what I gotta say. So I am trying to push it out. But at the same time, like, if I don't recognize my humanity, then I can't even be, useful. So like when it's time and I feel like I don't have anything to say or I don't have to say anything, then I'm like, I'm gonna just chill and sit back. But at this moment right now, I'm like bubbling with information and like different styles and design and ideas like within my medium and the different things that I do that like I have to get out right now. So yes, I do have to push out singles, but like I recognize that it ain't nobody that's God is my boss, but like it ain't nobody that can like tell me I have to do anything any certain way.
And for your upcoming project or works that you're working on, like what role are you taking? So already you've been the DP of this music video. Like what other hats do you put on?
I'm the curator of this project. That's like the main role that I've assumed. I'm the writer and the director / curator. So I feel like I have stories that I want to tell, but I'm also trying to be democratic in how I like put out these conversations, because I have a specific point of view on things that I might know or I might be new to knowing, but I'm trying to work with as many people as possible that are also artists to turn my monologues into dialogues, like to make what I have to say in like a real like chilling like conversation, like with whether they're a painter or a sculptor or a singer or a photographer or whatever, having a conversation with them, like, I started this song, this is what it feels like, this is how I feel, this is what I'm trying to say, what is your experience with this? And then having that conversation over a few days, and then trying to create together, you know, a piece that's conveying that conversation and making it about connectivity.
Do you already have a vision for what this work is gonna be?
Yeah, it's a project. It's like a big old project. I don't have another word for it. I'm trying to think of like a good word for it, but like, yeah, I feel like it's like a heist. It's like it's like all these different things that are like steps or plans and pieces that like, I have this book right here. This is called, it's a word I made up. It's called a retrospective analysis. This is the future of myself and the world and our connectivity as people, like prior to it coming out.
Were you high when you came up with that word?
No, that's
Okay.
what's crazy is like I was sober, and the only thing that was able to like make me feel connected was like sitting down and like really like writing out exactly how I see things going before it happened.
All the next project, or is that like all of your works?
No, so that's why it's the profit part of the word is like this is what's going to come. So I'm reading this to make what I'm making.
And that's going to include an album, music.
I don't like using the word album because
Okay.
it's so like it's just like it's stupid. You know what I mean? But it is art, and it is dense, and it is like songs, it is music, it is like a lot of stuff. But I feel like how many albums dropped last week?
Who knows?
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what I'm dropping is way more important than that.
You know when it's coming?
It's not in this book yet. If it was in this book, I would know, but it's not in the book yet.
I've seen you perform many times. I mean, there was a time in Chicago where it's just like if I went outside, you were somewhere performing. So
Performer, yeah.
yeah. One time was in 2016 at Parade to the Polls, and I don't know if you remember that, but I was there and I was actually on stage with you, and it's a different feeling being on stage. I mean, many artists performed that day, but when you stepped on stage, there was an energy shift that I felt. It was visceral. And that's when I was like, oh, he's really a star.
Thank you.
He's really a star, and not only that, but anointed. And I use that word, I come from a churchy place, you know, a churchy existence. So that's the word that immediately came to mind when I feel like spirit and energy moves in a space. Would you agree with that? Would you say that you're anointed or you have a special calling?
Absolutely. Yes. I think I believe that I have a very important and pressing, important and pressing calling on my life and certain responsibilities that change over time. But I've always felt that weight, but it's not too heavy to bear at all. And I feel like I also have God's hand in my life, and so like even if it is a weight or it does feel heavy at times, like just like this book, it's like it's already written, and so I just try and roll with the punches and celebrate those highs that we get, and walk my walk. But I appreciate you saying that. That's actually not the first time I heard that. Really? Yeah, but I also feel like I just said this in a song. Like I was saying, we've been jamming a lot lately. Like we've been kind of like trying different new approaches and new processes. And I had the song yesterday where I said, I take God with me everywhere I go. And that's not something that I had ever said before. My aunt used to always say this. My auntie Tony would say, take God everywhere you go. Don't try and leave him nowhere. And I always thought that was funny because that's like such a crazy concept, like leaving God behind or trying to run away from God. But like we're very powerful as humans. Like, we're more powerful than we think we are. And I think, like, one of the reasons why I have a show that's different from everybody else's is because I bring God with me on stage. And so,
Is there a performance in particular where you felt transformed or changed?
a specific performance where I felt there was after a show that I played in 2018. Like, the last song is always Blessings. I had a show. It was a Castle Light show in Johannesburg, South Africa, and it was my first time on the continent, and we were really just in and out. We only spent like 2 days there, and there were a bunch of problems going on with the show. My drummer didn't make it on time, so my stage manager had to play drums for me. He's raw at drums, but he's not in my band. Like, he doesn't know it like that. But it was great. But the show was amazing. Probably like in my top like 20 shows, like in terms of my performance. And after the show was over, I remember we were going to the bus and we could hear like this like echoing, like bellowing sound. And it was like, because the show was big. I think it was like 10 or 15,000 people out there. And there's like a tunnel that they all had to walk through to like get out the show. And they were all saying, "Are you ready?" But because they're in this tunnel, there's so many of them, it's like reverberating out and shooting out like a wave of sound. And when I figured out what it was, I saw it on Twitter. People were taking videos in the tunnel and stuff. I was like, "Oh, that's crazy." But that was one of those moments where I felt like, like I feel like when I'm not on stage, like sometimes I feel like I'm like, even right now, a little bit like I'm in disguise, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I'm Clark Kent when I'm not on stage. Like, because I can't talk my shit and move how I want to and be as loud as I want to. It's like, because that's just normal society. It's how we have to be. But my real communication is how I perform a song after I know it and I'm on tour and I'm hype and I'm sweating. Like, that's when I'm like my most real self. And so, like, those short moments, like that time in South Africa, like, it's one of those moments where I get to feel what I feel on stage while I'm not on stage. You know what I mean? That was a long answer. I'm sorry.
No, it was good. But let's get into like the work you've done. I mean, your first project, 10 Day, is now 10 years old.
Crazy.
And you've been all over the world sharing your art. As a young man, how did fame affect your creativity and who you create for?
Wow. I mean, it's something that I have to like try and consciously like step back and try and like look at myself as if I wasn't myself or if I was myself at a different time. But it never really works that way. You're just like going through life. And so I think like it affects me in the same way that growing up affects me, or having kids affects me, or getting married affects me, or someone passing away affects me. Like, it's so a part of like my life that like it's not very often that I think about it like that. But I'm kind of a child star. Like, I started touring when I was 18. I played my first show when I was 15. I had projects and stuff releasing before my name was Chance the Rapper. I was just looking at pictures. It's Justin from Social Work's birthday today. I'm looking at pictures on Facebook. I forgot I was in a whole rap group, like called Instrumentality, through high school, where I was putting on shows and selling tickets. I used to go perform. They put the X's on my hand and kick me out after my performance because you can't drink. And like, but I've been like wanting to do this for a long time. And I think like there were points where I used to say out loud as like a 13-year-old kid, like, "I'm trying to be famous. Y'all ass playing around." You know what I'm saying? Like, I had big dreams, big goals.
But was there a difference for you, like when you were creating at U Media or like with your group, The Social Experiment, and then you're blowing up And right before the big day, you know, you look at the track list and it's a whole new set of stars that you're working with. Like, at that point, are you thinking differently about who you create for and the way you want to put out projects?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a difference between when I was making, I think in every project, in every song, really, if I break it down, like I'm creating for somebody new for a new reason. It's like I did talent shows when I was a kid, you know what I mean? My metaphors in high school were a lot of inside jokes about what was going on at the school. So as your audience grows, as your own individual mind for what you think is right or important or funny or whatever changes, then, you know, who you're speaking to changes. And I think like one of my favorite things about the big day is that it really does, in retrospect, to me, feel like a project that's not about impressing people or showing off a specific wit in such a showy way. I think like there's a lot of like lines that I listen back to nowadays, you know, from Let's Go on the Run or, you know, Single No More or Eternal, or just like little lines that I peep, and I don't always remember what my intention is behind every line, because, you know, time goes on, you know, you listen to a song less and less after you first make it. And so like, sometimes lines just jump and bite you and you're like, oh, but there's a lot of lines that are about like freeing myself of like trying to impress somebody or please somebody. And I think like one of the things that I would say most about the sound that when I listen back to some of my really early stuff that's not even out yet, is that there's this undying need to impress. I'm writing like feeling disrespected that I'm not discovered yet at 13 versus what's most important to me at 26 when I got my second child on the way, or I'm about to get married, or I'm...
There was nothing in you that was just like, this is about to be my first album, and I need Nicki Minaj. Like,
no, yeah, I mean, I had met Nicki earlier that year, and it was crazy that those verses even came to me. But I feel like what would impress me at that time was to be able to work with like multiple female rappers. Like, I think like...
Did it feel like a departure in your sound? Because from Coloring Book to The Big Day, to me, it didn't feel like a huge departure, and especially not in the themes of your music and what you talk about. But in terms of sound, did you feel like it was a departure, and was it intentional?
I feel like sound is such a, like, I guess like sonically, it was a departure because there's a lot of different sounds that I didn't really explore before. Like I got like songs that are like more like 90s New Jack shit. I got stuff that's like really based in house music. I got stuff that's like, you know, I don't even know what to call Francis's style, like contemporary folk. I really don't know what it is, but like, I think I explored a lot of new sounds and got to work with people that I never, like, you know, Randy Newman. Like, there were people that like I never thought that I'd be able to, or I always dreamed of having the opportunity of songwriting with. But I think like, rather than departure, I would say progression. You know, evolution. A positive progression. There's a lot of bars on Coloring Book about the confusion of the relationship with my then baby mama. You know what I mean? At the time, I'm speaking positively about wanting to make her my fiance, but if you know my real story, that didn't happen until like 3 years later. And I think that there's a song in between, one of those 2018 singles where I say, I don't want my next album sounding all ushery, like a Confessions reference. And it's like, Dave Chappelle told me that an album or a special, like in comedy, like they don't define who you are. They're like a yearbook photo. You come in and you document who you are in that moment, and then you come back next year and you make another one. And it's like, I felt like sound-wise, it was a natural evolution, or not a natural one, but a supernatural evolution of what I had been trying to manifest.
And it was also a risk. And I don't think people talk about this enough with you. Like, you take huge creative risks.
That's what you naturally are if you're a true artist. Because we all have feelings. As human beings, we all have emotions. We all think that we know what's right or what's wrong, and we go through things. But artists are the people that communicate at the highest level and know how to make it beautiful. Fuck being cool. Like, cool is what corporations worry about. Like, they know how to make something beautiful and speak to you. And so when artists are having conversations, a lot of times they're having the conversations that we're not willing to have. And so I think, like, when you develop a following, that means to a certain extent you become cool. You become something that's marketable, something that kind of belongs to a larger entity, whether that's your fans or whoever, like, you know, propagates your image through, like, trying to sell other stuff, but you become a part of, like, what other people consider to be theirs, rather than them coming into your world and saying, wow, this album is crazy. It's a service now. It's like something that they pick up weekly, you know? And I think it's always easier being the underdog than it is being the champion, because the underdog is not only allowed to take risks, that's what we want. When we want something new, we mean we want something new. You know what I mean? And I think, like, you only don't want something new from something you're familiar with.
I'm glad that you brought up being the underdog, because I feel like that was so much a part of your narrative. Everyone loves rooting for the underdog.
Of course.
You leave Chicago and you basically have the keys to the city of Chicago. Is that fair to say? It's
The keys to Chicago? I would say so.
But what did you discover about yourself when you left that safety net?
Well, I had a lot more freedom to do a lot more drugs. I was, I was in a lot of studios and working with a lot of people that I, grew up wanting to work with, but I wasn't necessarily in a super focused space. And I went through a whole bunch of stuff, just like being out there, that, like, I don't think prepared for, because I was 21, I think, or 20. I was 20, about to turn 21.
Like, what do you mean stuff?
I mean, I had a whole lot of money, I was becoming, not a household name, but this is like after Acid Rap, so I'm like very, like, on the underground scene, where all the LA rappers, all the people were moving to LA in 2013, like, I was becoming popular in those spaces. And so, I don't know. I was single, I was 20, I was, again, doing a lot of drugs, fucking with a lot of girls, and just being a 21-year-old with too much money and no label and no, like, responsibilities of children or, like, any older person that could tell me what to do. So I was just wilding. I was just having fun. But then I got really sick, And I had to sit down for a second, and I just started reevaluating what my next moves were gonna be. And that was when I decided to move back to Chicago and started working on the surf project with the social experiment, and got started going to church again, and got back with Kirsten. That's when we had Kinsley. And it kind of just like, saved my life, so to speak. I don't want to speak dramatically, but like, I didn't really have anything that was pulling me in any like positive direction at the time. And yeah, I forgot the initial question. It was, what was it like when I was out there, or what did I find different?
Yeah, what did you learn about yourself when you left your safety net of Chicago?
I learned that somebody being invested in you doesn't necessarily mean they want the best for you. And I think also I learned that.
Like, what are you talking about there?
I just mean that like, you could have great things going for you.
No, I mean you. Specifically, who was invested in you?
Oh, there were a lot of people invested in me. I'm just saying that not necessarily all the people that were invested in me wanted me to be successful, And a success for them doesn't always necessarily mean success for me. Mm-hmm. So when I was using you as an example, I'm saying that you have a lot of people that are riding on you, right? Because you run the TRiiBE. Mm-hmm. Doesn't necessarily mean that all those people want the best for you.
Have my best interests in mind.
Yeah.
So you come back to Chicago and ground yourself in the community. Like, what community are you grounded in? Describe your people.
Well, right now my people are all the people that live in this house, and my family, and a few of like my best friends that I grew up with since high school. When I first came back, before I had Kinsley, it was everybody, everybody that I ever knew, from grade school to high school to after school to the library, anybody I basically had ever met.
You could find community wherever you went.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is like a certain privilege and position that you've been able to benefit from. How do you operate in that privilege?
Well, I only know what I know, like my own personal life. Like I haven't like experienced anybody else's life to really compare it to. Mm-hmm. My dad always worked for the city up until 2004, when after Barack won the Senate seat, he came and worked for the what is it called? The state, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then after that, he worked in the White House for 2 years, like in 2008, whenever he won, 2008, yeah. And then he came back to the city in 2012, I want to say, and started working at the mayor's office.
So I'm like, there has to be some perks to that, right? I mean, I attended Magnificent Coloring Day at the White Sox Stadium. I saw all the craziness. I had to fight a crowd of people to get pictures, like when Ye came out unannounced. Yeah. So it's just like, how do you have access to things like that compared to, another indie rapper that may look at the things that you've done and be like, how is he getting this done?
Oh, I was trying to figure out exactly what you're insinuating. So my dad did not get me the White Sox Stadium gig. We actually used the stadium, which is owned by the same family that owns the Bulls. Jerry Reinsdorf, I think is his name. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was probably one of the most popular artists from the city. Mm-hmm. And they hadn't done a concert there in I don't know how many years. And I told them myself that I could break the record for attendance if they let me do an affordable sized ticket. Ticket started at, I think, $35. If they let me use the space behind the boards to sell the rest of the seats, and if they employed mainly black contractors to do all the work for the staging. And they agreed.
So you're in your mid-20s and you're like, you yourself brokering these deals all over the city.
Oh yeah, and beyond the city. The Kit Kat commercial, that's something that I pitched, an idea that I had. You know, the idea to keep my music free, what's funny is that I got invited to the White House before my dad did. You know what I'm saying? And obviously that's no slight to my dad. My dad is that nigga, you know what I'm saying? And he helps out a lot of people. He gets he meets with people and tries to like coach them through shit. Like I have a lot of people that come up to me randomly and say, yo, your dad is the truth. But I do feel like there's always like some sort of like, there needs to be an explanation to my success. So if I gave a real explanation, I would say it's God. Like there is a one true living God that we've been hearing about our whole lives, and his hand, his unmoving, unchanging hand is in my life. But if you're looking for like a specific like human person, white or black, my dad, my ex-manager, whoever, like I'm the man with the plan. And it's not like I'm a one of one. That's never what I've said either. I've always told people that if you believe in yourself, if you get a team and a plan together, you could be successful to whatever capacity you want to be. So at some times when you're an independent artist, you might not actually achieve all the things that somebody else wants you to, but you might be the highest selling or highest earning independent artist all the time. You might be the first independent artist to win 3 Grammys. You might be the first independent artist to open up Sox 35th or do whatever it is that you do. But you do it at your own pace. You do it knowing your story and what you had to do to get to where you are, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and there was this moment for me where I no longer saw you as the underdog. You became like a figure of power to me, and that was when you purchased the Chicagoist. And don't get mad at me for asking you about it. Okay, but because I want to back up, because that's actually the reason why we are sitting here today. It's because I was a person being loud on the internet, as I often am as a person in media. And I started to get loud about you one day, and I had like 1,000 followers, and I didn't think it would really get to you, but it did. I was just so surprised at how accessible you were, but you also kind of put me on notice of like, your voice is powerful. Totally. And, think about the things that you say and the impact that you want to have. And, but yeah, for that moment, I wonder if you were aware of what that moment really meant to the journalism community. You bought it at a time where journalism was like in turmoil. It was like publications shuttering, the Ebony situation. Not only that, but like DNA Info in Chicago had just shuttered, and all these other things that were making the industry very uncertain, especially for Chicago media. And I think that kind of put you on notice in the media community, where everybody was just like,
you want to know why really though?
What's going on? Yeah.
You want to know why really?
Yeah,
I'll tell you, even though you already know the answer. The answer is because I'm black. Truthfully speaking, it's because I'm black, yo. There's very few people with a track record that clearly shows how anti-capitalist they are or how they treat people with respect and dignity and jobs than there is me. I've like, and maybe I know you could be like, well, actually you're manager, but I'm just saying, like, ask anybody how I operate, and DNA Info being shuttered was a part of the Chicagoist being sold. It was all stemming from Gothamist, basically. The Ricketts family, who niggas could have been mad at, that owned the Cubs, but they was mad at me, shut it down because the office tried to unionize. And public radio bought Gothamists and a bunch of the DCists, San Franciscoists, and Miamiists and Chicagoists, and was looking for over a year, I think 2 years, to try and find a buyer. And nobody came up and bought it. And I'm not gonna say how much I bought it for, but it was cheap enough that a lot of people could have purchased it. And what ended up happening was a person who worked at DNA Info, who was a photographer, was working at Best Buy. And I came to Best Buy to buy a camera from my aunt, who's a photographer. And the guy told me, hey, you know that Chicagoist and DNA Info are up for sale in Chicago. And I would love for you to buy it because I had such a great experience working with you when I did a piece on you at DNA Info. And I said, you know what, I'm gonna look into that. And it still took me like 6 months to actually get around to it. And when I finally did, I bought it. And what ended up happening was no one knew I bought it. And I had a couple of crazy interactions with the Sun-Times, with really crazy interactions. If you look up the history of it, it made no sense. And it did feel like hit pieces from the Sun-Times, from Crane's Business Chicago.
No, I remember because we got involved. We were just like, what is this cover story that they running on?
It was a lot of, it seemed kind of weird, right? And so I put them on notice on a song.
Yeah,
and said,
security.
And I said, I bought the Chicagoist just to run you racist bitches out of business. And the next thing I knew, there was 50 think pieces about how bad, how this was gonna be the end of the world for journalism because I had bought the Chicagoist, and how I'm gonna make everybody write great reviews of my music. Like, it's so short-sighted and racist that I really don't even pay it any mind. And when the Chicagoist does come out, it's gonna be highly successful. Why? Because Morgan's gonna help me with it. And a lot of Black people that have had terrible experiences in journalism are going to effectively guide me into how to have journalistic integrity on a higher level, because it doesn't work the way they act like it works now. So, point blank, at the end of the day, I own it. Nobody can take it from me. Nobody can make me start it before I want to. Nobody can force me to sell it. And I am going to attack it with the same principles that I attack everything with.
Okay, period. You've learned to like take all this criticism. I'm sure you've like built up a skin.
Love it. I don't know.
I mean, and that's what was my original comment to you, just like, if you're gonna be in news, like, this is all we do all day. So, welcome to this.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be in the editors. Like,
Yeah.
But I mean, like, I feel like criticism is something that we naturally deal with in the world. Like, people are gonna criticize you. People are gonna have something to say about how you did this, how you raise your kids, how you park your car, whatever. People are gonna have something to say about anything. I think the way that it's damaging is when it makes somebody not wanna do their thing. Because I do fully believe that we are all blessed with specific talents and gifts, that every single person is gifted, not all in the same areas, not all the same amount, but everybody has their thing. And if criticism is taking you to a place of frustration or doubt or whatever it is, to the point that you're not creating, then there is a problem. And I don't want to say the problem is the person that's critiquing or the person that's being criticized. And I'm not going to say whose fault it is more of, but I think at the end of the day, the only person that really has the agency to be like, I'm not gonna let this shit stop me, is the person that's supposed to create. So, you know, but it does hurt your feelings. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like it doesn't hurt your feelings, especially if you're a creative, because that's what you do, is make new shit. And so, you know, I said this thing the other day that really came from a conversation with somebody else, so I don't want to take credit for it, but I was saying it's a lot easier to enjoy or judge art than it is to make or share art. And making art, one of the most difficult things in the world. Making beautiful, fine, you know, intelligent, memorable art, incredibly difficult. But what's one of the hardest things in the world is sharing it, because you don't know what it is a lot of the times. unless you're making it to impress yourself. Then you know, and there's no issue or debate. You know what you're making. But man, you got, all of us in this room are creative. So like, I'm sure you've written a story or done a shoot or done a something.
Oh, please. There was a time when we first launched the TRiiBE where we would just stare at the screen. Like, did we make a mistake? Is there a typo? And like, is somebody going to call us up from the mayor's office and be like, this is wrong? So I completely understand what you mean. At MCA, where you premiered Child of God, you spoke about how you had to take time and find courage to create again. How did you find that courage?
To be honest, through film. If it wasn't for me being like, okay, how good can I get with this camera? How much can I learn about how much can I make in this short period of time? Like, even if it's just a test, even if it's just a sketch, even if it's just this, how much can I make? That made me fall in love with the process of filmmaking. And it wasn't until last year, this poet, Aja Monet, had a conversation with me about my process, and it was a really long, very insightful conversation. But the main thing that I left with was that I needed to learn to respect my process, which would then allow other people to respect my process. And then by the end, I would be able to love my process. And like, that's a word, because my stuff that I make now, that I'm making right now, has just been, you know, The Heart and the Tongue is, to me, my best shit that I ever wrote. You know, Do Your Thing, Child, to me, is the best shit I ever wrote. Like, it's like I don't even know how this shit coming to me. It's really just that I'm making a deliberate point to create a certain way with a certain intention, with a certain goal in mind, and I'm having fun with it while I'm doing it.
Is this latest piece, Child of God, are you speaking to Black people? I can't lie, it felt like this is Blacker.
Yeah,
Black.
I'm talking to the children of God. It's a big project, and the main goal, one of the main goals, is to create connectivity between all our peoples to the point that we regularly correspond with all our peoples, and we regularly are ready to go up in arms about any conflict in any Black part of the world. And I think that was one of the biggest things that I learned when I went back to the continent and went to Ghana, because it's every African country is different. They all have their own customs, but Ghana is very Ghanaian, you know? They are very Black, very pro-Black, very like, you know, the president that liberated Ghana, their first president of Ghana, they were liberated in 1957, you know? That country didn't exist before. It was the Gold Coast before that, because the English said there's so much gold, they could just walk and just pick it up off the coast. Like, all of these countries in Africa were under colonial rule, and Ghana was the first sub-Saharan African country to gain its independence. And when they did, the guy who did all this work, it was a bunch of people that did all the work, not to say he did all the work, but their first president was very intentional about including symbolism, insignia, teachings of Marcus Garvey and the UNIA in America and Jamaica. That sort of Blackness and that idea of global Blackness and the diasporans needing a space and a place to a home, and not always physically, because that's where a lot of the conflict comes from, and a lot of like the misunderstandings and the Black people becoming capitalists comes from, is it's not always just about physical land. Sometimes it's just about being represented. We just got the lynching bill signed. You know what I'm saying? 100 years later, after it's been, you know, and when there was the Asian hate stuff going on, it was not just Asian Americans pushing for that. You know what I'm saying? So when you have a continent, when you have a country, when you have a statehood that's vouching for you globally, and then it doesn't just work that way. It's not a one-sided relationship. There's conflict all throughout the continent because of colonialism and neocolonialism. So we the way that everybody showed up for us in 2020, and there were protests all around the world. Like, we got to go up like that for Sudan, and we got to go up like that for Ethiopia, and we got to go up like that for, you know what I'm saying? And so I'm trying to create this connectivity through the travels that I'm doing and through the art that we're creating. And I think that according to this book, that's what's going to happen in the end. But yeah, Child of God, but it's not only to Black people. It's a universal idea and understanding. But you do usually have an audience and a perspective. And so the piece that Nyla created and I created was definitely for us to see it and for us to hear it.
Mm-hmm. And it feels like an ode to Black women.
Absolutely. To be honest, and that's why I keep saying I love the process so much. I wrote the song, both verses and the hook, in Los Angeles in like September of last year. And I didn't meet Nyla until early January of this year. And when I met Nyla, I talked to her about my idea of doing this gallery and doing all these works and doing all this stuff. And she was telling me that she had issues with, like, sometimes with her form of art, painting these nude figures that are, like, from memory, they're naturally voluptuous, naturally, like, imperfect figures. And she was like, I feel like niggas is gonna sexualize my shit, so I don't really wanna put out my art all the time or show it to people. And she told me when I came to her and told her Child of God, the only reason, because the song was originally called Do Your Thing, Child, when I told her that I wanted to rename the piece, she said the only reason why she was kind of worried about it at first was because she felt like that couldn't be the title. You know what I mean? Like, that even though she could understand what I was seeing, that didn't really, that it would be too much of a disconnect for people to take it in. And by the next day, she came back to me and she was like, "That's perfect. People should have trouble thinking that." Yeah.
The people who get it will get it.
Right. And so the idea of an album is basically obsolete at this point. Like, you're either making something for people to TikTok to, or you're making some art. And I don't diss the TikTok, because I love making TikToks. Mm-hmm. But if I make an album, it's going to be weighted by how much it sells, by how much it plays on the radio, by how, you know, a lot of metrics that don't come down to, like, who did it mean something to and how much did it mean to that person. And that's what I think I'm most invested in right now.
Mm-hmm. When I first saw the piece, I looked at you and I told you, this is it. You could feel the energy in the crowd of, like, people responding emotionally to the lyricism and to the piece. And for me, I think it's something very powerful about thinking of God in terms of a collective and, like, an embodiment of Black women. So I do thank y'all for that.
I'm glad that you took time to, like, figure out what it means to you, because that's what's the most valuable thing to me is, like I said, feeling heard or feeling understood. And I want to create more of those experiences for my fans. So I feel like, if anything, if I ever feel like, in a way, like I could do more for my fans, the one way that I do feel like there's room to grow is I want to feel more connected. And I don't even like using the word fans. Like, with the people that listen to me, like, I want to be more connected with you. So, like, what I'm trying to do now is create these experiences and create these dense moments that, like, our contemporary art and our documentation of what's going on, but people can, like, pick apart years and years from now and be like, this piece, it meant this at this time, but now it means this now. You know what I mean? And I think, like, along the way, not even along the way, all of this is in pursuit of a greater connectivity with all our peoples across the whole planet.